If you want to help, please come over here.
Been there.
We can swap seats real quick.
Been there.
Yeah, you've been there.
Okay, let's go. We ready now.
I'd like to call to order this May 5th meeting of the Policy Board of the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm proud to be here this morning, on this beautiful day.
Oh, yeah.
Before we get started this morning, if there's anything any members would like to share going around the table this morning, I think we're going to have time on the agenda. So this is your opportunity to bring forward any information that's going on in your jurisdiction that you'd like to share. Ms. LaScalette.
Well, we are delighted to announce that we have hired a new county administrator. He starts next month. His name is Vic Carpenter, and he comes to us from Kershaw County, South Carolina. So we're super excited to have him on board.
As is Mr. Alvarez.
As is Mr. Alvarez.
You want me to just,
Anyone else? Yes, Ms.
I'll
Savannah.
go ahead and say something. Henrico County set our personal property tax rate last month, and our personal property tax bills went out. And we had estimated the increase in vehicle cost or vehicle values at somewhere between 15 and 17%. And when they came in, they were at 35, 42, 47% higher. You probably heard that. And so we spent a lot of time, well, I did on Tuesday, but there was a legislation that passed the General Assembly this year, and it'll be effective in July 1st, that you can or are allowed, it gives us, permission? I've forgotten the legal term, but it gives us permission to give a temporary reduction in the amount, not that the assessment changes or the value of the vehicle, because by law you have to do it according to the book. And just to let you know, the vehicles are much, much higher values. You probably figured that out. All I have to do is watch TV or go to a dealership. But I think we didn't realize it would be that much. And the public, of course, is concerned, that it is that much. So I wanted to point that it is not just Henrico that this is impacting. So just mention that we are going to work on giving a rebate, or a reduction or a rebate. I guess it's called a rebate, due to the fact that it was Senate Bill 12. Yeah, I don't remember all the other details, but if you wanted to look that up, it allows us to give a reduction or rebate, rather. We had used the other. There's also a standing already available bill that we used this year on real property, real estate, that we used and gave a 2% rebate from last year's real estate bill. And then, of course, we reduced our real estate tax rate this year. But we didn't figure on the cars being worth that much. And it is a big hit on many people. And Ms. LaScalette and I were talking, and she pointed out that many people don't own a house, and this is it. They have their car or their vehicle, and I've gotten calls from people who own a big truck because the guy's in construction or something, and he's renting a small place, but yet he's got to pay all that money. It hits the people who, I guess you'd say, who can't afford to do it the most.
So you didn't adjust your rate? You
No.
just, okay, so you kept the
You
rate
can't do
at,
that once it's been.
sorry.
It's been, you can't do that legally once you've set it. We could change it next year, but we are hoping that in January of next year, the inflation won't be so high. Inflation won't be as impactful. So that's what we're going on. People can't understand. They say, you're lying, it's not inflation, you're just doing this,
Yeah.
And I explained to them one definition of inflation is too many dollars chasing too few goods. And I said, think about it. Everybody needs a car and there are none. that makes cars that are here now and available, even if they're old and beat up, are worth a lot of money.
Mr. Chairman.
So-
Yes, please,
Yeah,
Mr.
I was
Austin.
gonna ask, is that bill retroactive? Because you're right, you can't change the rate once it's set by law. However, I'll be interested to see what the law
Well,
does, because
yeah.
there was a significant increase in older vehicles. I have one and I have to calculate my percent. And I have to tell you, this is the first time I've said this publicly, my percent increase was like 45%
yeah,
on an
yeah.
old vehicle. Now, the good news for me was my bill is less because of course, my colleague on the board, Mr. Carroll, championed a vehicle registration fee cut, which was like 50%. And I was just so proud when we got that passed. I got the votes to get that through, which we did, which lowered my bill, which I've been working on now for probably about 6 years to do that fee. Thanks to the CVTA, which provides some much needed revenue. I was able to do that. So, and of course the chair and vice chair. So we appreciate that. But that was one of the things I had been working on for 2 years. COVID stopped me last year, I must say. But this year we were determined not to let another year go by without that cut. From $40 to $20 is what it was for Chesterfield car owners, okay? As you point out, if you live in an apartment, that wouldn't impact you as well. But you have, almost everyone has a car. Most people have a car, I should say, not everyone, but most people have a car. So I do think that's something to be aware of. And of course, it's the timing of it. It's not entirely inflation. It's the way it was valued that's required to be by law.
January 1st.
January 1st by law,
Yeah.
it's required to be that way. But yeah, I certainly had sticker shock, and I just wrote the check last night, by the way, to pay for it, well in advance, and not considering cash flow. So, but anyway, and my colleague may want to comment on that, because I know he's been, Mr. Carroll may want to say something, Mr. Chairman, but, yeah, I was concerned too. And I think that's something we have to be cognizant of. I had no idea it would be that much, no idea. But I was glad to cut a ribbon cutting too. I was at the floor briefly, a ribbon cutting at a park at Swim RVA. And by the way, before we finished leaving the site, I saw 2 mothers and 3 kids walking the park, half a mile park, that will be connected to bike and trails. Hey, we got bike paving, bike and trails. So people able to see, it's a beautiful site. Come on out and check it out sometime. I can walk with you, let me know when you come.
Mr. Carroll?
Well, unlike my colleague, my bill didn't go down. And I actually have 2 2017 vehicles, my wife and I, and both of those vehicles increased by anywhere from 18 to 22%. Even with the adjustment that we did on our, both by cutting the registration fee in half and by we actually increased our number that we get from the state. So our number for the $41 million that Chesterfield gets, that put us at about a 43% funding from the state. And we actually increased it to 55%, knowing that this was going to be an issue. I still don't think we're right on our number, because I do believe, as Mr. Bannon said, that the evaluations came in higher than what we estimated. And so we've asked staff to take a look at that and get back with us when we have a number to see if we can actually take another measure like Enrico's doing. That's something we're looking at as well.
Yeah.
And I can answer Mr.
Please, Ms.
Holland's
O'Brien.
question. Mr. Holland said, how are you gonna do that? Well, Henrico we send out 2 bills, the first half and the second half. So
Right.
I tell people, pay the first half and wait, we're definitely gonna reduce the second half of the bill. Because you can't, as you said, you can't change the assessment or the value of the vehicle, because it has to be done by law. And you can't change the tax rate once it's set.
Correct.
And this, we are hoping, is temporary also. As I pointed out, maybe next January, the value of the vehicles will go down. We'll have other cars out there to purchase. But we are gonna deal with the second half of the bill, is what you mentioned that, how you're gonna take care of it.
Yeah, I'm not
All right.
positive because I don't see all our bills, but I know, if I may comment, that, we have 2 for real estate, but for personal property taxes, that's primarily done usually at the first half in June, when the June bills are sent out, which
Well,
were cut just weeks ago. But
different
my
counties do
gut
it
feeling
different
is
ways.
that, and I lived through inflation before, my gut feeling is that we won't see immediate relief. It'll take some time. I mean, I was shocked at the gas pump this morning, paid $4.25 a gallon. And I was almost scared to put the gas in my car. I said, well, should I wait or what? I'm pretty conscious about the rate of everything I pay. But anyway, Mr. Chairman, I tell you,
All right, thank you, Mr. Hall. Mr. Carroll.
One last comment, and I appreciate Savannah bringing this forward, but in a quick cursory review of the Senate Bill 12, it will require a local ordinance to be developed by the locality in order to develop a method on how they're going to do this, and that's what's in the legislation. So we're going to have staff to get working on that.
and the good news, Mr. Chairman, if I might say, the good news too, the state doesn't have a budget yet, so we still have a chance to amend that budget that comes from the state, so we might have an option in there somewhere with the state budget coming up in the next few weeks, we hope.
Good discussion we had in executive committee on this very topic, and even better discussion in the meeting this morning. This is one of the great things about being a member of this organization, that you get to share information like we just did. So thank you for your comments. At this point, do we have a certification of a quorum, Ms. Firestone?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Consideration of any amendments to our agenda this morning? If not, I will move to approval of our April 7th, 2022 policy board minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
A motion by Ms. LaScalette.
Second.
Second by
Mr. Hodges.
Mr. Hodges. Discussion on the motion? Okay, thank you. Mr. Parsons just advised me that we do have someone attending remote, so that will require a roll call vote this morning. So, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Hodges.
Aye.
Mr. Carroll.
Aye.
Mr. Holland.
Aye.
Mr. Lumpkins.
Aye.
Vice Chair LaScalette.
Here.
Davis. Ms. O'Bannon. Aye.
Sorry. Consideration.
Ms. Page.
Aye.
Chair Williams.
Aye.
Ms. Carmack.
Aye.
We have Mr. Addison.
Aye.
Dr. Newbill.
Here.
Ms. Tim.
Aye.
Ms. Dean.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Mann.
Aye.
Thank you. And the motion to approve the minutes passed.
Thank you, Ms. Firestone. This will move us to our open public, Ms. LaScalette?
Point of order, so the comment that we needed to have attendance taken because we have someone online, would you explain that?
I'm sorry, I didn't intend that applied to this vote, but it was fine. I think when the action was requested later in the agenda, we will need a roll call vote because there are voting members that are remote.
Okay, but we do have a quorum for.
We do have a quorum.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Please.
thank you for the clarification because I wasn't here because I thought we were talking about attendance as opposed to attendance.
See, I thought we were doing attendance because of what you said.
Yeah, okay.
My apologies.
Sorry.
Apologies for the confusion.
Okay.
That was for the agenda, right? So then we have to move.
Approval of the minutes.
So do I need
We
to?
had approval of the minutes.
That was the approval of minutes?
Yeah, yes, because we had a motion
Oh, well, I
by
have
Ms.
to,
LaScalette,
I
a second by Mr. Hall.
am shown as, am I being shown as not here for the April 7th meeting? I was absent, I have it in my book, I don't even recall, but I'm not sure. I'll have to check on it. It's taped in.
Go
I can
ahead.
check it and correct it if it does list you as absent during that meeting. I can watch the video back and confirm.
As always, you do a roll call.
I thought this was on consideration.
Okay, do we want to, let's go back and have reconsideration on the motion for approval of the minutes. Okay, so we're gonna repeat that.
Mr. Chair?
Excuse me, do we have a motion for reconsideration according to Mr. Gregory? And we need a second. So first, I need a motion and then a second.
Mr. Chair, after voting on the prevailing side, I would make a motion to reconsider.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll, and we have a second from Dr. Newbill. In discussion on the motion. So the motion is for reconsideration on the vote for approval of the minutes. Mr. Greger's nodding his head up and down, so seems like we're on the right track this time. All right, so do we need a roll call, Mr. Clausen?
Defer to legal counsel.
We're deferring to you, Mr. Gregory, as a subject matter expert.
The motion for reconsideration I would recommend a roll call vote because we have remote participants today.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
so Ms. Firestone, would you please call the roll? And again, this is on the motion for reconsideration.
Yes, sir. Mr. Hodges.
Aye.
Mr. Carroll.
Aye.
Mr. Holland. Mr. Lumpkins.
Aye.
Vice Chair Lascolette.
Aye.
Mr. Davis. Ms. O'Bannon.
I'm gonna abstain.
Ms. Page.
No.
Chair Williams.
All right,
Ms. Carmack.
Aye.
Mr. Addison.
Aye.
Dr. Newbill.
Aye.
Ms. Tim.
Aye.
Ms. Dean.
Aye.
Mr. Mann.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes.
okay, so I believe, Mr. Gregory,
Now you would have to entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
that's where I was headed, so. Things like council and the chair are in tune, we're in sync now.
That's good.
I didn't even.
So moved.
This is a rare moment. So, at this point, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the
So
minutes.
moved.
Excuse me, we have a motion from Dr. Newbill and a second from Mr. Hodges. In discussion on the motion. Again, Mr. Gregory, do we need to call the roll?
I would recommend it, sir.
Council recommends calling the roll. Ms. Firestone.
Thank you. Mr. Hodges.
Aye.
Mr. Carroll.
Aye.
Mr. Holland.
Aye.
Mr. Lumpkins.
Aye.
Vice Chair Lascolette.
Aye.
Mr. Davis. Ms. O'Bannon.
Abstain. Sorry.
Ms. Page.
Aye.
Chair Williams.
Aye.
Ms. Carmack.
Aye.
Mr. Addison.
Aye.
Dr. Newbill.
Aye.
Ms. Tim.
Aye.
Ms. Dean.
Aye.
And Mr. Mann.
Aye.
Thank you. And the motion passes.
That certainly was easy, wasn't it?
There you go.
A lot of work in a minute.
Now we got the easy stuff to do, right? That was the hard
All
stuff.
right, let's move on to open public comment period. Anyone wishing to address this policy board this morning, please come forward, give your name, your address. If you represent an organization, the name of the organization as well. We will allow you 5 minutes. Do we have anybody that's wishing to come forward on Zoom this morning, Ms. Firestone, and address the board?
No, sir, we do not.
Seeing no one in the room coming forward, I will close the public comment period. Chair's report. We have an exciting meeting coming up, something we've all been working on since our August meeting. And it pertains to the 3 organizations in Central Virginia that work together for transportation. We're having a joint meeting, next meeting, with Plan RVA, CVTA, and the RRTPO, having everybody together in one room where we're going to be talking about what we do for transportation in Central Virginia. Staff is putting together a great agenda. It's going to be a good meeting, and it's going to be something, like I said, something we've been working to achieve and going forward since our August meeting. So we have a lot of things now coming together because of your efforts. So that's pretty exciting. That's all I have of the chair's report. Mr. Secretary, how about your report?
Yes, sir, thank you very much. The general updates, so item 5A in your packet, page 8, is the current work efforts that staff is undertaking. I'll highlight a couple things. The Ashland Trolley Line study is moving forward. We actually had staff was able to participate in the State Trail Advisory Committee meeting that was in person in Richmond this past week. And we were able to give an update on the work that's being done with the Trolley Line Trail as well as the fall line in general. So that was great to actually be in front of people and be in a room together to talk about all the great work that's going on as we move forward with that project. And we continue to have support from the National Park Service and have been doing a number of in-person tours and field work to continue moving that trolley line project forward. The CBTA is doing a lot of things and has met this past Friday to consider regional funding for a long list of projects. So that is moving forward, as many of you also participate in that authority as well. So we're excited about being able to provide some updates on milestones and next steps at the June 2nd meeting, the joint meeting that the chair mentioned. We are looking forward to next year, starting July 1, embarking on our comprehensive scenario planning process. And this is something that we had originally intended to be a major support for our transportation planning efforts, but we think that there's a real opportunity to use this process as a way to catalyze conversations across the region, not just around transportation, but around many different things like development and density and housing and environmental issues. So we're excited about starting that process. It will be probably an 18-month endeavor, and we're going to be soliciting consultant support for that. So it's a big effort that is probably similar in scale to the long-range transportation plan. So we're excited about bringing back information to the policy board as that process kicks off. And obviously we'll be incorporating our other subcommittees, their TAC and others to provide support and feedback to the staff as we move forward with that. We're going to have some other updates this morning on some of the other efforts that are identified here. Moving on to page 5, or item 5B. On page 10 is our work status and financial report for March 2022. And I will note that this reflects the budget amendments that were approved by the policy board. So this is up to date. And we're excited about bringing back our updated budget projections for FY23 at a future meeting so that we can continue to move our process and our projects forward. Mr. Chair, that's the Secretary's report right now. I would actually, if I can take a little license, our Community Transportation Advisory Committee Chair, Mr. Martin, is joining remotely. We did not, we overlooked adding an item on the agenda for him to provide an update, but I wanted to defer a minute or two of my time if he wanted to share what the CPAC is up to.
You want to do that later in the agenda?
I defer to the chair's wisdom.
Let's do it when we get the updates from the other organizations. And if you will, at that time, please remind me.
Yes, sir.
To include Mr. Martin. Okay?
Thank you.
All right. So that concludes your report, Mr. Secretary?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
All right, that brings us to new business, and that brings us to the Bike Med 2045 plan. So we have a presentation this morning. Barbara, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be back at this table. I'm used to the podium, but I'll sit here next to Ms. Tim if she will allow me. And I certainly want to start acknowledging my colleagues on the Bikehead team. Phil Riggin, who's in the control booth over here, and Dan Lotto, who is in the corner. they are the experts in the region. They both commute by bike. They are very active in the community with the network of bicyclists and pedestrians and in transit, in connection to transit. So I really want to make sure that I call them out and really appreciate their efforts in helping over the last 2.5 years. But we also couldn't do it without our steering committee, which are made up of the local localities representatives, as well as our state agency partners, advocates throughout the region, nonprofits, and those that are interested in safer active transportation for the region and transit as well. Because that has been, it's been a long process. I think we've had some 12 meetings with our steering committee. And a lot of work had to go into this because the last plan was in 2004. And so we are long overdue in updating this plan. As you know, you launched a public review process for the plan document back in February. And we have worked through that process from February 9th through March 23rd to receive public comment in the process. And we've had a really good exchange that we'll talk about further in the presentation today. Second slide. We started with a call to action for safe streets. 60% of our street network is capable of serving cyclists and walkers and those using mobility devices because of their lower speeds and lower traffic volumes. So our intent is to try to make better use of our roadway system to make it safer for those to travel within their neighborhoods, to connect from neighborhood to neighborhood. But at the same time, during this period of the last 5 years, from 2015 to 2020, we've had 32 pedestrians killed by vehicles while walking. But the good news is severe injuries has declined. But the bike pedestrian fatalities have increased over that same time by 45%. And that was our call to action when we started this process in 2.5 years ago. That was the number one concern we also heard from the public as we developed this plan and working with our steering committee. Next slide. So what is Bike Ped RVA? We started with, in concurrence with the Connect RVA 2045 plan. But there are a lot of things that it is not. It is not intended to be a separate ranking of priority projects. We start with the basis of the Connect RVA 2045. It is not focused on any one jurisdiction. It's meant to serve all 9 and to connect a regional network. And it is not meant to be a static or finite plan that we put on the shelf. This is more of a web-based digital resource guide. We do have a document that is before you, and I think if you didn't have a chance to read it online, we've got some extra copies over here on the table. Would encourage you to take one if you need, and if there aren't enough, we can certainly make you a copy. It's a lot easier to read, not on the screen. But what Bike Ped RVA is, it is meant to be a comprehensive framework for moving forward strategically and looking at how do we fill those gaps, how do we make Bike Ped active transportation a real transportation mode that people have a way to do short-term trips, to do long-term trips by Bike Ped or other means that are non-motorized. It is a companion to the Connect RVA 2045. And it also is a collection of best practices that we will keep refreshed on the website. But it's mostly a recognition that people have a viable means and a need for a viable means for travel for their everyday life and their everyday needs. Okay, next slide. So we spent a lot of time, I think we had 3 different meetings talking about guiding principles, goals and objectives, and developing this vision statement that I encourage you to take a close look at, because it's very carefully worded with emphasis on mobility for people of all ages and abilities through a safe, continuous, recognizable, so clearly signed, clearly marked, and intuitive pedestrian and bicycle network. And I think that's really important to really highlight that as a guide forward. And from this whole process, and looking at the planning framework too, we realized, this is a regional network, 2,200 square miles. How can we possibly tackle this big issue and serve all people and provide that mobility? So we focused on 6 big ideas. And we've got a lot of information in the plan about these ideas. But the 6 big ideas, of course, are to concentrate on the regional spine network, and that being the Capitol Trail serves as a good eastern route that is more of a regional network. How can we extend that westward through the region and maybe even connect beyond the regions? We're looking at those opportunities. The fall line that we've all heard so much about, and it's so exciting that we'll connect Ashland to Petersburg. That passes through so many neighborhoods. It connects schools and universities and commercial and retail options, as well as healthcare. How can we maximize the use of the fall line by connecting it through a spine network and reach more population equitably? That's a key, big idea, that there are so many, we've identified areas where there's zero car households, where there are greater needs because of low income and dependence on transit and the ability to connect to transit and safely connect and have access, first mile, last mile connection to transit. Connecting the dots from one existing facility to another. Stratton Park is a good example. That's the beginnings of a viable part of a regional network. It might look right now that, that's just a small piece, but what does that connect to at either end? We want to be strategic about how those connections are made to fill those gaps. We also work very closely with the localities and with state agencies, VDOT and others, on identifying higher standards so that they are uniform and better marked and safer for the public that are using them. And then prioritizing access to transit stops. Again, working with GRTC to make sure that we, make the stops better and provide the handicap access and the safe first mile, last mile connections. And part of this is, as we've talked about, you can go to the next slide, is part of the website. Is a story map, which really is, the plan will be, the document itself is just a part of that. There's a whole series of map layers that are convey useful data, crash data, existing and proposed bicycle and pedestrian facilities. And by proposed, we mean those projects that came forward from the Connect RVA plan as constrained projects, like many segments of the fall line, as well as other projects that are being funded through the resources that we have, as well as the local and regional plans and those that are nominated by localities to be part of this important network. The mapping is included in this ArcGIS layer as the proposed, as well as future long-term routes, the connections, for example, that we could make to the Capitol Trail through the western part of the region. We also have information on a map layer on the level of traffic stress, roads that are safer as they are now because of low volumes. We alluded to the 60% of the road system, and those that would not be conducive to making improvements for bike ped. We also show the equity emphasis areas as used in our Connect RVA, where we really want to focus our efforts in making a higher priority connection for those priority areas. But we have all sorts of resources for Complete Streets, Complete Streets Toolbox, which is also linked to this website. But these are resources that we intend to keep refreshed and available for our partners to use in making plans. So during this public comment period, we identified some 60 stakeholders that we wanted to talk to, because during our Connect RVA process, a lot of that was by virtual connection, and we wanted to try to get out into the community and meet with folks directly as to where they are. We did a pretty good amount of that meeting time, meeting with 20 different groups or individuals, including Virginia Community Voice, the Greening Team on South Side, many of the Friends groups of the rivers, including the James River Park System, Black Girls Do Bike, Hollybrook Apartments at St. Joseph's Villa, so we get a perspective on what it's like to be dependent on the caravan for transportation and for their daily needs in bike ped. The Partnership for Smarter Growth, the City Office of Immigrant and Refugees, Bike Walk RVA had an open house where we had people coming in and a free exchange of ideas, and other advocacy groups. We also, invited ourselves to any of the local government meetings and went to New Kent and Charles City and the Ashland Town Council. We also attended Mr. Thornton's last constituent meeting on April 18th. But we continue to be available and would love to engage with public, with your constituents, if that opportunity is available to us. There's a whole community engagement report as part of the website that we encourage you to look at if you have questions about what we heard from those commenters throughout the public review process, and how we tried to incorporate as much as possible and address those issues in the plan itself. But we did focus a lot on implementation and working with our partners, looking at the tools that they have available through zoning, through comprehensive plans, small area plans, site plan review, the tools that they're working through locally to position active transportation projects and prioritize them. But we really are here to set that regional table and use those resources to help educate. How can we recharge and recommission our active transportation work group that was established in 2016 to lead the discussion on that strategic implementation and the ongoing maintenance and operation of active transportation networks to make sure that it's actually usable and safe and continue to be improved and connected. So those are all of the elements of the process that we went through and are included on the website. So that brings us down to a host of recommendations, key recommendations that are part of this planning effort. And these are explained in more detail in the plan. You can see them before you, some short-term, 2 to 3 year. We're trying not to look beyond, the next, what's doable in the next, 5 to 6 years in kind of a capital improvements program format. How can we restructure the active transportation work group to be more functional and spearheading some strategic action through the region as per this plan? And how can we develop and maintain performance measures that can get built back into our funding capabilities for active transportation? How do we measure success, and how do we prioritize active transportation as a real transportation mode along with all of the other modes. And then via resource, of course, through this website and through our active listening and working with our partners. And the next slide, 3 to 5 years, just working with our localities to make the Complete Streets Toolbox better and more functional so that you can actually pick up some specifications from that and apply to certain circumstances in context with projects that you might be considering at a local level to fill these gaps that we've identified in partnership with you. Using the newly completed Regional Transportation Safety Plan as a guide, looking at where the highest injury portions, segments, intersections of the network need to be addressed first to improve the safety of those areas. And to focus on, the ultimate goal of 0 deaths for bicycles and bicyclists and pedestrians as the Vision Zero work group continues their work. Just identifying the top 10, maybe jurisdictional connections. Where can we start? How can we make sure there's alignment at the different jurisdictional boundaries? And then carry forward a uniform type of standard from one jurisdiction to another on our roadway system. We may need to look more comprehensively at posted speed limits and safety traffic calming measures that can help make those roadways safer. And then longer term, continue to work with our localities in establishing pilot projects to maybe test some of these ideas before they're implemented, and help with our localities to identify candidate roadways for reconfiguration, such as has happened in Chesterfield on Turner Road. How do we convert some of those travel lanes to something that offers the active transportation mode in a safer fashion? And of course, working with GRTC and other transit providers to make sure those connections are safe at the bus stops, as well as other points of connection. So that's kind of a very quick summary of this document that's been in the works for 2.5 years. We welcome any additional ideas as either today, questions today, or as you take a closer look at the website, we'd be very happy to answer those questions where we can. So that brings me to the action that we're requesting of you today. And you can see it before you that we acknowledge the critical importance of alternate transportation modes for safe and equitable regional growth and development, and well-planned and connected active transportation network represented by this bike ped RVA 2045. And the Connect RVA 2045 will provide an essential resource for all of our stakeholders and decision makers to implement infrastructure priorities. So therefore, be resolved that the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization Policy Board adopts Bike Ped RVA 2045.
Any questions for Barbara this morning? And Barbara, thank you for your presentation. Yes, Ms. LaScalette.
I'm not sure I actually have a question, I just have a few comments. Bicycling is in rural areas recreation, plain and simple. Nobody in Goochland County rides a bike to work, to school, to shop, for entertainment, or anything else. It's entirely recreational. And the thing that I want to be sure of is that we are not taking transportation funds and putting them on something that doesn't help us at all. So how do we guarantee, and I know this is not a funding document, but how do we guarantee that of all rural areas, basically bicycling is recreational, entirely recreational. So how do we stop money going here when it needs to go to the roads in our jurisdictions?
Mr. Parsons?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, that's a great question, Ms. Lascolette. What's before you today for adoption is a plan, just like the long-range transportation plan is. So there's no commitment of funds. It's basically a tool that every member jurisdiction can use to identify if you were going to improve active transportation facilities in your county, here are some that might be a good place to start. Here's what's been identified as a gap by existing users. For example, there may be a shoulder widening that might be very critical to connecting two different villages in Richmond County, something like that.
No.
That's where maybe that was a bad example.
Yeah, okay.
I'm saying this is not a commitment of funds in any way. So that comes in other ways like RSTP, CMAQ applications. Those are vetted again by the TAC and will come before you as a policy board under separate requests.
All right, so follow up. if you don't
Please,
mind.
Ms. Lascolette.
So the map that we're shown here, if we approve this, we're approving that map?
Yes, that's part of the plan. That's correct.
Okay, so if we disagree with the map, is there room for negotiation on this?
It's a living document, like all other plans, so that can be amended.
But approval of this does approve the map? Okay, that answers my question, thank you.
Mr. Hodges?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Ms. Jaycox for her presentation. She did come to town council. And the team, I think it's a great plan and plan to support it. Ashland considers itself the center of the universe and not just the terminus of the Fall Line Trail, which is a great recreational activity. Hope it gets funded. But there is a U.S. bicycle trail that converges both the north-south Route 1 and the east-west Route 76 converge in the town of Ashland. And so our concept is to somehow reference that, whether it's in, so that there's a recognition that the East Coast Greenway goes up through the region and goes north and links us to other areas of the state north. There's good connections south to Petersburg, but we're hoping that the U.S. bicycle routes will be referenced in the document and reflected, so we can build on that in our community.
Great, Mr. Hodges. Other comments, questions? Please.
Again, I think what we're looking at here is no different than perhaps any other regional plan. It's a concept plan for localities to utilize. I have a lot of rural roads in Chesterfield County, especially in Matoka, and I agree that I don't believe, I could be wrong, right? There might be one, but I could be wrong. I don't believe there's a lot of people that are not riding their bike from Matoka to Richmond. If they are, they should be envied. It's a long ride, but nevertheless, I do think having a plan that a locality could use in the future, knowing that anything that would have to be approved spending-wise would have to come through the committees. I'm okay with the concept, and I think that we could all vote whichever way we thought was necessary if anybody brings a plan forward to say, hey, we want to do this. So I'm okay with the concept, and I am okay with the fact that localities still would have the opportunity to choose whether they want to adopt anything from it.
But I think your point is, Mr. Carroll, you're recognizing the fact that some localities and even some places within the localities, it's not going to necessarily be applicable. As you said, in your district.
Yep.
Don't look to see people commuting to work.
I mean, I would say up on Hull Street, in that part of Matoka, I think there's probably people riding their bikes to school. I think there's people riding their bikes to work up in that part where we have the greater density. People live in some of the neighborhoods who work at some of the local places, and so I certainly think that a lot of our communities are gearing towards those type of communities where people could work, live, and play within. An example, Westchester Commons in Midlothian District has a lot of residences in there now where people can actually work in those businesses up there and walk for that matter. So I do think there are parts of different jurisdictions that this type of mobility is necessary, but I will say down in the southern part of Chesterfield County, not so much.
Any other questions or comments?
I yield to you.
Please.
Chairman, thank you. I completely understand the needs of the conversation, especially as a regional plan that this is. I also think there's from the previous conversation around the increasing costs for cars, gas, and other options going on that we probably will see for the long term happening. Inflation or not, I think you're gonna see this be a conversation we'll be having for a long time. A lot of the observations we might have on past behaviors could be related to the fact that gas has been $2 a gallon and cars were not too expensive. With that shift, bikes are an option that people might need to turn to, especially as the cost goes up. And if we don't have infrastructure to support them getting around, even a plan that could be decades in the making, it just does, I think, a good step forward for our region to show our support for understanding that, recreational travel is now becoming necessity in some capacities. And yes, I live in the city of Richmond. I have abilities of doing that easier than some other localities. I understand that. I also did sell my car to take advantage of the increasing costs because why not? And I ride my bike and the bus a lot, and I know that's not available everywhere. But this plan to me shows an investment of our time to see how we can connect all these pieces together. And so while it might not be an option for people we see today, I do see it potentially becoming a necessity for more people in our neighborhoods, especially when we look at places that are struggling with finding employees. Getting a person who can work at the salary that some places are paying and get there on a bike is probably a really good option. So I just wanted to kind of offer that from my perspective and approach the Richmond. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Addison. Mr. Holland?
Mr. Chairman, if I may comment. First, I want to thank you, Barbara, for the plan and for the presentation. I was reading through it again as I looked at it. I think it's a significant step forward for us in the region. Some statistics you mentioned really jump out at me. One thing I subscribe to and applaud is 0 deaths from bicycling and walking. I mean, life is fragile, and it should always be handled with great care and consideration and thought. And looking at, of course, from the health standpoint, as noted, this is quite a significant fact. I may briefly excerpt it, my friends. It says physical inactivity has a direct impact on the quality and quantity of your life on earth, according to accounting for approximately 3.2 million deaths annually, and the loss of over 69 million disability adjusted life years. And we just heard yesterday where we had 1 million deaths from COVID. Who could have thought about this type of pandemic impacting us? Who would have dreamt at this point during our lifetime we would see something like that occurred probably in 1918 with the flu. About 1 million people gone. And so I applaud the plan. One question I have, which is maybe not a great question, but I know a few years ago we put in our comprehensive plan in Chesterfield a bike ped chapter in the comprehensive plan, and that may be a good thing to have that's connected with this particular bike ped RVA 2045 to make sure our comprehensive plans connectivity and data and knowledge and opportunities is critically important. And I noted particularly, as you mentioned, modes of transportation. So I applaud you for the work, the effort that goes into it. And sometimes, I think it's important to note too, if I may, sometimes the work we do will benefit future generations. A classic example of that economically was when I was on an inner city visit in Raleigh, North Carolina. We were talking about the research train on RRTPO at that meeting many years ago. That they were saying that in 1960 they contemplated building that park. And so that they knew it would take generations for that to materialize. And last weekend, I was in the Raleigh area, a new employer, Fidelity, that was moving to the Raleigh area, a site. And she says, we moved here for 3 reasons: talent, talent, and talent. So, in that area. And so, and I think we see that in all connections. So I'm pleased that we do have a plan, we have a vision. And I wanna harp on again the 0 deaths from biking, walking, which I think is a notable goal that we should always strive to achieve. So with that thought, Mr. Chair, I support the plan, and I'll make a motion if there are no other comments to approve the plan. I'll yield for other comments that, but I'll move that we approve as requested in agenda item B-1, the motion to recommend RRTPO policy board adoption of the Richmond Regional Bike Pedestrians Plan, Bike Ped RVA 2045.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. We have a motion for approval of the plan. Do I have a second? Then we can have more discussion if needed.
Second.
Second.
Mr. Addison is the, I believe, first on the draw. You're credited with the second, Mr. Addison. Any discussion on the motion? Yes.
Just to follow up with what Mr. Holland said, in May or June, I think it was the end of May 2020, I did a survey of the bicycle organizations and companies in the area and asked them what was going on. They had no bicycles to sell. Talk about cars to sell, but there were no bicycles to sell. And I went to, was it AG's, and I think it's Rowland's. And I did a survey of the local companies. They said they had very few bicycles and they were getting in more. So you're right, people decided to. I took my bike in because the tires were rotten from not being used. And I got new tires. But I asked them before this, how many bikes did you sell and who did you sell them to? And their number one customer is to people who've been charged with a DUI or who's convicted of a DUI.
That's good.
And that they are required, they cannot drive, so they get bicycles. Which is why you see people in their work clothes with their legs like this and trying to negotiate a bicycle and going down the road. So I thought that was interesting. So if this keeps the DUIs off the road, that may be worth it. Okay, that's my comment. And it's true.
Got all kinds of takeaways from that.
Well, that's what they said.
I'll keep my comments to
Mr.
myself.
Chair, I would not ride your bike in a suit and tie or anything.
Like I said, we need to go ahead and call the roll.
Mr. Chair, I have,
Yes, Mr. Hodges.
I believe Ms. Jaycox had a response to the question I raised during discussion.
Oh, about the national.
About the US bike
US
routes.
bike, right, that is in the regional layer as part of our GIS, but we do need to make reference specifically to that in the plan.
And I assume that's
Yes.
a reference that could be added.
Yes, yeah,
Great,
to
thank
that specific map.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Parsons just had a sidebar with me. He would like to get some clarification before we actually call the roll. Mr. Parsons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make sure that we had the wording correct for the motion. Was the motion to adopt the plan? Is that the wording adopt as opposed to approve? Thank you very much.
It's not written correctly.
It's not in the packet.
Okay.
We will go with Mr. Holland's motion where he says he moved to adopt. Is that correct, Mr. Holland?
Yes.
Okay. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Hodges.
Aye.
Mr. Carroll.
Aye.
Mr. Holland. Mr. Lumpkins.
Aye.
Vice Chair Lascolette.
Very reluctantly, aye.
Mr. Davis.
Aye.
Ms. O'Bannon.
Aye.
Ms. Page.
Aye.
And Williams,
Aye.
Ms. Carmet,
Aye.
Mr. Addison,
Aye.
Dr. Newbill,
Aye.
Ms. Tim,
Aye.
Ms. Dean,
Aye.
thank you, and Mr. Mann.
Aye.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call and the motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next on the agenda is our CMAQ project request from Chesterfield County. Mr. Parsons.
Yes, sir, I'm gonna defer to Mr. Booth.
Mr. Bushing.
Hi, good morning,
We
Mr.
have
Chairman.
this for us this morning, right?
And thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So this is a proposed swap for the congestion mitigation and air quality program. So a little bit of background. At last month's meeting, this board took action to approve the allocations for RSTP and CMAQ. There were 3 new projects that were added to the CMAQ program. One of those projects was the Alversa Drive roundabout in Chesterfield County. Since that time, Chesterfield has found out that that project was also selected for state funding through the revenue sharing program. So it's effectively double funded. There are 2 other CMAQ projects that are higher ranked in the program that were not selected because they were originally in RSTP. And as we discussed last time, there were overruns and the programs had to be reworked. Both of those were also in Chesterfield County. So the request today from Chesterfield is to swap out the project that's double funded, remove it from CMAQ, and replace it with the 2 smaller projects that were unfunded. So quick overview of those 2 projects. The first is a left turn lane on Lewis Road at Route 10. This is down near Chester. This is a project they've been requesting for several years. It's about $1.2 million project. The second project is a project out of the 360 arterial management study. This is a left turn lane on Woodlake Village Parkway. So there are left turn lanes currently, but it still backs up. So this would reduce congestion at that intersection and improve traffic flow. This is about a $2.8 million project. So the net impact of this swap is essentially $500,000 more for the TPO. So we would actually have less of a commitment overall because these are smaller projects than the proposed roundabout was. So you can see the estimates here. So this is escalated out to the year of expenditure. So starting with fiscal year 27, which would be preliminary engineering for these projects. So TAC reviewed this at their past meeting and unanimously recommended approval. Staff agrees with the TAC recommendation. We feel like this makes a lot of sense. So the requested action, there's essentially 3 parts. The first would be that the TPO would remove the Alversa Drive Old Buckingham Road roundabout from the CMAQ program, so it would no longer be selected. We would replace it with the 2 projects, the Lewis Lane Road at Route 10 and Woodlake Village Parkway at 360. And then the TPO would approve the amended allocations program. And this allocations program swaps 1 for 1. There's no change to any other project in the funding plan. It just takes the dollars that were on the roundabout and puts them on these 2 projects instead. So that's everything I have for you today. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yes, Mr. Hodges. Excuse me, Ms. Watkins. Thank you.
Mr. Bushing, you said at the beginning that there were 2 projects higher than this. When I looked at the chart, I see the Richmond signal system retiming improvements. So when I looked at this, I saw 3 higher ones. Now, I asked our transportation folks, and they weren't sure, but they told us maybe this Richmond project has already been funded. Can you just explain?
Sure.
I support what this is, but I'm kind of the premise was that we went to higher projects, but I see 3 higher projects.
Yes, sir. So when we initially selected last month, there were 3 projects selected, which included the Richmond signal retiming. There was a Hanover project, which was the Creighton Walnut Grove roundabout, and then there was the Alversa roundabout. So all 3 of those, I think it was like ranked number 1, number 3, and number 5 or something along the lines. So the 2 that got skipped were originally in the RSTP. So we're still going to be funding all of those other ones that were higher as well. We're just swapping out this roundabout for the other two. So the short answer is yes, that one is funded in the program as well. And if you look in, I think it was attachment C in the agenda packet, it's the full list of allocations. The projects that are highlighted in green are the new selections. So you'll see the signal systems on there and the Hanover roundabout.
The green means what again?
The green projects are the new selections.
Okay.
So that's the full set of new projects that we'd be adding this year.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Bushin, I've got some questions. Okay, I've got shades of green.
Shades of pink, yeah.
The next page, 39, okay. My question is this, and I think this is what Mr. Lumpkins was trying to get at. When Chesterfield says it wants to swap this project for that project, under CMAQ, they have other CMAQ projects. The question I have is, are there other CMAQ projects region-wide that will score higher, and did they have an opportunity to be considered?
So no, sir, there are no other higher scoring projects. So that's the reason that we considered this at the staff level.
Okay. Now, I think that's what you and Mr. Lumpkin was trying to get.
Wasn't that direct, but yeah.
It's not that direct, okay.
No, that's good.
Okay, any other questions for staff? Ms. Huskalek?
Okay, so still following up on that, so it just so happens that these other projects are Chesterfield. But otherwise, we still should come back to the drawing board. In this case, we are coming back to the drawing board, and we're taking the next two highest projects. Is that my understanding?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so, I'm not sure I'm following. Okay, so so when I look at the map on page 20, the chart on, spreadsheet on 26, it's showing that the Richmond project, like I said, was scoring number 1, CMAQ. But then you have to go to 39 to see that it's somehow already funded somewhere. How is that funded?
Yes, ma'am. So I believe you're on the right page. So that page that you have 39 shows the table of all the allocations. All 4 of the projects that are highlighted in green across the entire row are the new projects, or projects that we either approved last month or these 2 that are swapping in for the roundabout. So if you look through that, there's 4 projects in total. There's the 2 Chesterfield turn lanes that we discussed today, and then there's the Hanover roundabout and the signal project in the city of Richmond.
Okay, and we had already approved the Hanover roundabout previously.
Yes, ma'am, and the signal project as well. So those were included last month, and then this is just a revision to what was already approved. So they're still marked as new because they're new for this fiscal year, but they were already approved previously.
Okay. And so I'm still having trouble with the colors. I thought I learned those in first grade. Yes, but there's 3 different pinks here. I don't know what they are.
Yes, ma'am. And I believe it's at the bottom of the page, but it's showing the project deficits. So in the far right column, it's showing if there's a deficit on the project, which is essentially a commitment that we'll need for a future fiscal year beyond the 6 years.
Oh, I see, it's over here on the other side, okay. So I missed that.
Ms. Lumpkins?
On the chart on 39, it's just gonna show my lack of understanding, but so is the Richmond signaling project not being funded with CMAQ funds? Or what is the source of the Richmond project's funds?
No, they're all CMAQ. So that entire table is projects being funded with CMAQ.
The 39, the table on 39.
I believe that's, yes, 39 is the CMAQ project list. So that's everything that's active that currently has funding within this 6-year program or in a previous year that's still ongoing.
So maybe that's the challenge I'm having, is the earlier chart on 20-something shows things that approved before, in the works now. It's a whole long window of time. So some things have been funded, some things have not, but it's just all the projects that are in CMAQ.
So the project sheet that was on page 20, and I'm sorry, I don't know the page numbers off the top of my head, but the earlier one is all of the applications that we received this round. So this is the rankings of where everything fell out from this round of scoring.
Okay.
And then the one you're looking at in the 30s is the actual funding, and it's picking new projects and funding the existing projects that have previously been selected.
I'm catching on.
So, Mr. Chair.
I think I'm starting to.
I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Page.
So how long does a project stay on? How frequently do you apply, and how long does a project stay on before you have to either reapply or it drops off?
So it's an annual application process. So every fall, we hold an application window, and then in the spring, we come back to you with the selections based on the prioritization process. And that's where we then pick new projects for funding. And then the list is wiped clean, and next round, people have to apply again. So it's an annual, start from scratch every year in terms of the applications.
Thank you.
Parsons.
Just a little context for this conversation. This is something that the TAC is laser focused on all year round, because this is a major source of funding for a certain set of projects that are eligible for CMAQ, as well as SCBG. So I think in your local briefings, when you get with your TAC members, their insight is critical to this, so that so that you're informed and are able to make an educated decision when the options are presented. So if you need help from staff to get a better understanding of where things are, please let me know, and we'll do everything we can to provide that information and resources, so that when you get to the table, it's an easier process.
Mr. Parsons, I believe, from our last meeting, we had a very good discussion on project funding and how we were going to address, the overages that we were experiencing with the funding of projects. And we specifically requested staff identify what are the problems associated with these overages that we're seeing with the funding of projects, where, as we pointed out in the last meeting, we didn't get any new projects, added, because everything was going to address projects already on the book where we were having overages. And we agreed, there was consensus around the table that we had a problem, and that we needed to go back and look at how the approval process was being done, whether it was a local project being brought forward, or it was a project that had been reviewed by VDOT, beginning there and start looking at how we come up with the cost estimates, how the cost estimates are approved, and then whether or not we're getting replete information about the project such that we have a good picture going in of what it's gonna cost, and we don't have to come back as a body and put more money to the project, because there was a concern that projects may be scored on less than 100% accurate information, that the project could be represented as being $1 amount, when in fact it's a larger dollar amount, which would affect the scoring. So that's something that we've asked staff to look at and to come back and, provide us with recommendations. I know y'all are going to do that, right, Jeff?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, please.
if I may, sir.
Yes, sir.
I move that the RRTPO approves the revised CMAQ allocation plan as presented.
We have a motion from Mr. Holland. Do I have a second to the motion?
Second.
We have a second from Ms. O'Bannon. Any further discussion on the motion? Ms. LaScalette.
One last question. So there's $250,000 difference in the cost. And so where does that money just go back into the pot, so to speak?
Yes, ma'am. So the additional money would just be available in future rounds for other new projects or as needed.
Okay, that's what I thought, thank you. Okay.
Okay, I think we are at the point where we need a roll call. Ms. Firestone?
Yes, sir. Mr. Hodges?
Aye.
Mr. Carroll?
Aye.
Mr. Holland?
Aye.
Mr. Lumpkins?
Aye.
Vice Chair Lascolette?
Aye.
Mr. Davis? Ms. O'Bannon?
Aye.
Ms. Page?
She stepped out of the room just for a minute. She's just not here.
Chair Williams?
Aye.
Ms. Carmack?
Aye.
Mr. Addison?
Aye.
Dr. Newbill?
Aye.
Ms. Tim?
Aye.
Ms. Dean?
Aye.
Mr. Mann?
Aye.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call and the motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Firestone. That moves us to our next agenda item. Ken Lance is going to be providing us with a presentation on the FTA 5310 application endorsements. Ken, welcome.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. It is my pleasure to present to you for endorsement by the TPO 8 FY22 Section 5310 applications for the Richmond region. The purpose of the Section 5310 program is to improve mobility for seniors and individuals with disabilities by removing barriers to transportation services and expanding the transportation of mobility options available. Goals of the Section 5310 program include increasing public transit projects that exceed the ADA requirements, improving access to fixed route services, and decreasing reliance on paratransit, and providing alternatives to public transit that assist seniors and individuals with disabilities. I'd like to request the TPO's approval of the proposed resolution of endorsement of the following Section 5310 applications that are found on pages 41 and 42 of your agenda packet. The first project is for DRTC for mobility management. Project number 2 is Senior Connections for operating assistance in mobility management. Project number 3 is Chesterfield County Community Services Board for capital assistance. The fourth is Chesterfield County Citizens Information and Resources, capital cost of contracting and operating assistance. 5 is Hanover County, capital cost of contracting and operating assistance. And 6 is Goochland Cares, capital assistance. I'll be glad to take any questions.
Questions for Mr. Lance? Can I have a question? What is the total pot money we receive annually for these projects?
I'll
Is
defer
it
to
about
Ms.
1.1?
Around around 1.2 million. It varies from year to year. It is a highly competitive program. That is certainly the case. The program has been around for many, many years, so we I think have been oversubscribed for a number of years, which is indicative of the needs that are out there. But the pot of money for it really has not grown over the years.
Right, and this is money that comes through DRPT, and we recommend endorsements from the RRTPO for these projects going against monies that are going to DRPT, right?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I'd
Dr.
like to
Newbill.
motion that we actually endorse the following applications here. And that we accept this, approve the request for the staff recommendation.
Second.
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me.
I have a recommendation, a motion from Dr. Newbill, and I heard a second from Ms. Lascolette. Any further discussion on the motion for approval of these applications? Madam Clerk, would you please call a roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Hodges?
Aye.
Mr. Carroll?
Aye.
Mr. Holland?
Aye.
Mr. Lumpkins?
Aye.
Vice Chair Lascolette?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Ms. O'Bannon?
Aye. The
Ms.
5310
Page?
money and
Aye.
Chair Williams?
All right,
Ms. Carmack?
Aye.
Mr. Addison,
Aye.
Dr. Newbill,
Aye.
Ms. Tim,
Aye.
Ms. Dean,
Aye.
thank you. Mr. Mann,
Aye.
thank you, that motion passes as well.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. This brings us to critical place on our agenda where we are voting for the second time to amend our bylaws. I see Mr. Gregory is nodding his head up and down because he's glad to be at this place, as well as Chet and myself and all of you. So the first thing I guess we need to do, Mr. Gregory, is make sure that we've got the quorum necessary for the voting that's going to take place here momentarily.
I believe we do, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, good stuff. All right, I think, go ahead, Mr. Hodges, or Ms. Oscar.
I'm just keeping our fingers
We
crossed.
can switch chairs.
Yeah.
So at this point, we need a motion, is that correct, Mr. Gregory?
Yes, sir.
I will entertain a motion for amendment of our bylaws as presented. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I offer motion as presented, page 43 of our package.
Mr. Holland, thank you. Do I have a second on the motion?
Second, Mr. Chair.
I have a second from, excuse me, Dr. Newbill.
Have time.
Excuse
We're
me?
gonna call for comments.
Yes, we're gonna have some discussion on the motion, we always do. Go ahead, Ms. O'Bannon.
I just wanted to point out that in moving toward doing electronic meetings or virtual meetings, I don't sit on the FOIA Council. I do sit on as a board member of the Virginia Coalition for Open Government, and they advise the council. The discussion has centered on, with the virtual meetings, it's centered on, if you look at the screen, the name is up there of the person, and that's fine. But when voting remotely, they were talking about and recommending that you have a visual of the person. And I'm gonna use an example that everybody thinks is funny, but my sister and I sound very much alike. And we have often on the phone, people assume that I am my sister. We look nothing alike. And so if I were to work, to do the voting virtually, and if my sister were the one there, you would think it was me talking. And would do the vote, and someone untoward could use something like that. I'm just saying that. So their concern is that the person be visible. But we did have a discussion earlier about the fact that many of the jurisdictions don't have internet to the level of service where you'd have the person's face there, but that they would participate on the phone. So I'd just like to caution you that that is the discussion, is to be assured that the person who is making the vote is the person who is supposed to be making the vote. There's been discussion of, what is it, two-factor authentication? In other words, the actual person would be given a code or something, and I'm not gonna get into that. But when we have this in front of us, that we're going to accept remote, voting on all kind of issues, that I'd be aware that this is a concern for many people, that somebody might vote that isn't really the person who's supposed to be voting. So how do you authenticate that that is the person that's supposed to be voting? And we don't have anything that talks about that in this amendment.
We had a very good discussion regarding this in executive session, and I'm gonna let Mr. Gregory respond briefly. So the path forward is how we would address this issue.
Well, I don't know how you would address that particular issue. I do know that FOIA law.
I meant in case we did get clear direction from FOIA counsel or whomever, saying that this was indeed a requirement.
If the General Assembly amended FOIA to require visual authentication for casting a vote via electronic communications means, of course, the body would comply with that and develop a means to do so. Right now, that's not a requirement of FOIA. And so the FOIA as it stands now allows telecommunications for public bodies for certain purposes. And the bylaw amendment would simply allow this body, the bylaw amendment would remove a prohibition on conducting meetings via telecommunications means so as to be consistent with the other, Plan RBA or the CVTA for that matter, and other public bodies that have done so and adopt policies and procedures to allow for that to occur. It doesn't mean you have to do that, but it just removes that prohibition. So that's all the bylaw amendment does.
And knowing that, I really just wanted to bring it up because to consider or think about. Because I knew we could probably change it in policy, for instance, right?
To require
To require some kind of authentication that is the person. I mean, the recommendation is you see their face, but is there, just some form of confirmation maybe is the word, that is the real person. I don't know any other way to put it.
Chair.
Yes, Ms. Page.
Let me finish, Supervisor Banner. I just want to say briefly, I don't know, and it is my hope and my prayer that we all operate under three things, and that is dignity, respect, and truth, and integrity. Those four things. And I would think that as elected officials and those gathered around the table, that is how. That's why we were elected, and that's what we stand for. I absolutely understand the concern of many, and I know it's quite possible. And I would think that if it became a major concern, that it would be a time at a future date that we could amend these bylaws to include that, especially if the General Assembly put in a bill for that. And so that's all I got to say about it.
Mr. Greger?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Page is exactly right, and I want to also note that the paramount rule that we have to follow, of course, is FOIA. So regardless of the bylaws, regardless of any policy which the body might adopt, FOIA compliance is the paramount responsibility of the body. So if that were to change, or any FOIA amendment were to be passed by the General Assembly, that would be our primary guidepost. So, and I also want to note, part and parcel of the bylaw amendments, and you'll see this in your package, is approval of the policy and procedures that are required by FOIA to go right along with this bylaw amendment. So you have the bylaw amendment that allows, or rather removes, the prohibition on conducting meetings by telecommunications means. And then in order to facilitate that, you have the policy and procedure that guides the agency or the body on doing so, if you choose to do that, which of course we're doing so today under the emergency provisions.
And that was one of the things I was referring to. It could be put in that part of the policies. I guess it's the policy part. Well, it is under discussion.
Any further discussion? If not, we have Ms. LaScalette.
Sorry, just one quick question. I'm sorry. So obviously we're considering the bylaws change today. That's coupled with this policy document, correct?
Yes,
For
ma'am.
today, that's what we're voting on today.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, if we want to change the policy in the future, does it require us to vote on it?
Yes, it would.
Okay, thank you, that's all I want to know. Thanks.
Okay, now, Mr. Davis has left the meeting. Does that do anything to our vote quorum that we have to have?
I believe the quorum still exists.
I want to make sure before we go down this path.
He's coming back.
Yeah,
He's coming back.
you can.
He's coming back, but
Slow
when?
He left his computer on.
Good point. He knows he's gonna get his computer.
Well, Mr. Chairman, the quorum is, well, to approve the bylaws, you need 18 votes.
18.
Okay, you have more than that present around the table.
18, that's all I'm asking.
Okay, that's all,
Like I said,
okay.
we've come this far. I don't want to missteps at the last moment.
Right, that's assuming
Okay.
everybody votes.
All right, We got a motion to approve the bylaws and policy procedure amendments as presented. We've had discussion on the motion. Please call the roll, Mr. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Hodges.
Aye.
Mr. Carroll.
Aye.
Mr. Holland.
And I also vote for Mr. Winslow, our chair of the board. And I want to say, Ms. O'Bannon, we certainly know you and your sister, and we know y'all are great minds. And we really know that you would do only the best. I just said to get that in, Ms. O'Bannon.
It's just an example.
And y'all sound alike, but you should.
All right, let's get back to the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I said to say that. Thank you.
Mr. Lumpkins.
Aye.
Vice Chair Lascolette.
Aye.
Mr. Davis. Ms. O'Bannon.
Aye.
Ms. Page.
Aye.
Chair Williams.
All right.
Ms. Carmack.
Aye.
Mr. Addison.
Aye.
Dr. Newbill.
Aye.
Ms. Tim.
Aye.
Ms. Dean.
Aye.
Mr. Mann.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
I stand.
Mr. Davis.
And we see Ms. Dean.
Aye. Point of order.
Mr. Davis is here, if you want to ask him. Yes. Sorry.
Mr. Davis, would you like to cast your vote for the motion that we have before us to amend the bylaws and procedures?
And then I was there with the executive committee, so yes, I am in agreement, so my vote is aye in the affirmative.
Okay, so, Madam Clerk, please add Mr. Davis's vote for the approval, Ms. LaScalette.
So point of order, Mr. Chair. So did you say we needed 18 people to vote?
You need 18 votes.
18 votes.
Right, weighted vote.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, that brings us to our transportation agency updates. Mr. Mann, would you like to get us started on that?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Start off with the April CTB meeting update. The CTB received workshop presentations on the Virginia Interagency After Action Report related to the January 3rd and 4th, 2022 winter storm event and I-95 incident. They also received updates on the Traffic Operations Program, the Innovation and Technology Transportation Fund for fiscal year 23. They received the draft fiscal year 23 through 28 Commonwealth Transportation Fund 6-year financial plan and the draft fiscal year 23 through 28 6-year improvement plan. At the action meeting, they approved the fiscal year 22 through 27 6-year improvement plan program transfers for February 19th through March 18th, which included the following transfers of interest to this group. Commerce Road widening project in the city of Richmond, wrong-way mitigation at ramps across the entire Richmond district, and signal UTCD compliance upgrades across the Richmond district as well. The next CTB meeting is scheduled for the workshop on May 17th and the action meeting on May 18th. Based on the recent trend, I suspect those will be consolidated into one-day events. Smart Scale Round 5 update. The pre-application portal did close on April 1st. Richmond District received 106 pre-applications out of a total of 490 across the state, so that's 22% of the state's Smart Scale pre-applications were in the Richmond District, which is pretty much in line with last year, but just shows the great need here in our area. Pre-screening of those applications is to be completed by VDOT and OIPI by June 1st. As we do complete that pre-screening process prior to June 1st, we will notify applicants that they can begin work on their final applications if it's early. The final application period, again, will reopen around June 1st, and we expect it to close in early August. So that's the time frame for Smart Scale Round 5 applications. On 6-year improvement plan, the development of the fiscal year 23 through 28 improvement plan is underway. The Richmond District Public Information meeting was held on Thursday, April 28th at the Richmond District office. Definitely would like to thank the speakers and attendees, especially from this room, for participating and providing feedback. We will continue to accept comments via online, email, or regular USPS mail until May 23rd. Again, the draft plan was presented to the CTB in April, and it's anticipated the final approval will be at the June action meeting. And last update I have is on the Fall Line Trail. The VDOT design build packages that were approved by CVTA are in the works. We're starting with the northern section, which we anticipate advertisement by the end of this calendar year. The southern section will immediately follow that, probably in the spring of '23. We are in the middle of our location public hearings. May 3rd, this past Tuesday, we had a meeting at Lewis Skinner Botanical Gardens where we had about 150 attendees. Again, I want to thank, I saw folks from Ashland, Hanover, Henrico, City of Richmond, all at that meeting supporting that, so thank you for that. Next meeting, our last meeting on the location is tonight. That's at the Hilton Garden Inn in Colonial Heights from 5 to 7. So if any of you are available, would welcome you to attend that tonight. And those two are the only public hearings for citizen information meetings in this area. That's all I have, sir.
Mr. Mann, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Mann? Thank you, sir, again. That brings us to Tiffany. In case you weren't here last month, Tiffany now is our representative from DRPT. Mr. Brule has moved up to the upper echelon of that agency. So Tiffany, welcome. Please share with us what you got this morning.
It'd be my pleasure. So to follow up on Mr. Mann's update, we did also release our fiscal year 2023 draft 6-year improvement program. We do now have it available through our DRPT open data portal, which is located, I have the address included in the agency update, which I'll include for the minutes. But this is a different format. In previous years, we used to have it as a static PDF document. So this is now given a little bit more flexibility to search through for specific projects in our 6-year improvement program. DRPT has also been at all of the public meetings with VDOT, so we've been very encouraged by the comments that we've received and always appreciate being a partner with VDOT. Next item is our Transit Service and Delivery Advisory Committee. So we have reestablished a committee to begin work updating on some of our major processes, including our grants programs related to capital and operating, as well as our Transit Strategic Plan guidelines. The next scheduled meeting for the TSDAC committee is May 13th at our DRPT offices. We are encouraging anyone who would like to watch or participate. There is an online registration, and that's available on the DRPT website. I will also have the link included in the minutes for my agency report. Next, our Transit Equity and Modernization Study. Our study team held a virtual forum on Thursday, April 21st, to provide updates on where we've been since the submission of the interim report back in December. We now have a draft action plan that is available for public comment through May 13th, and more information can be found on the study website at vatransitmodernization.com. Last, I've been very pleased to hear all the discussion about bikes because we are going to be celebrating Bike Month this month. Bike to Work Day in particular will be held on May 20th, 2022, and DRPT is doing several different types of promotions through social media, advertising, and events. And the effort is to be able to raise more awareness about benefits of biking and availability of trails throughout the Commonwealth. We do have promotional materials that are available for any of our partners at bikeva.org. And any events that may be occurring during May that you would like to highlight, we would love to be able to highlight on the Bike VA events calendar. So please reach out to me or any of your DRPT representatives to pass that information. And that is all I have for my update. I'd be glad to answer questions.
Thank you, Tiffany. Any questions for Tiffany this morning? Okay, that brings us to Mr. Martin, who is our chairman of the Community Transportation Advisory Committee, I believe. He's joining us remote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I reported to the TPO previously, we have created a ad hoc committee, the membership committee, to look into the needs of the community that we felt were going unmet by the loss of our EDAC committee, the Elderly and Disabled Advisory Committee. That committee has been chaired very well by Lisa Guthrie, and it has identified 5 organizations that would enhance the membership of our committee towards that goal. Of those 5, 3 of the organizations have agreed to participate. That report will be given to our CTAC committee on May the 19th, at which time those members will be asked to start attending. Just wanted to give you an update on that. Also, along membership lines, there is some concern in regards to the fact that some of our jurisdictions, one particularly, is not represented by either a member or an alternate, and there are a number of other alternate positions that stand vacant. That is of some concern to us that we have a vibrant and engaged CTAC. And it would really be helpful if we had all of the positions in position, people serving in those positions. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Any questions for Mr. Martin? If not, we'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is future meeting topics. Anything y'all would like to bring forward at a future meeting of this body? This is your opportunity to get it on an agenda. Okay. RRTPO member comments. We've had a number of comments already this morning. But anybody wishing to add to the conversation about what's going on in your community or the region, it's your opportunity to do so. Okay, our next meeting will be June 2nd, which we've already discussed. Looking forward to that meeting and looking forward to seeing you all there. Should be a good meeting, a good event. Thank you for your discussions and participation this morning. Good meeting. We're adjourned.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Can't sell my bike.
No?
Can't sell my Colorado bike. I'll never get